Evening, everybody. Whiskey Doc here. I want to talk to you tonight about the art and the science of nosing a whiskey. There's different techniques you see by different experts and brand ambassadors out there, and I think they all have their merits. If you go to a master class or if you go to a tasting, typically the person who's presenting the whiskeys will show you their method, their technique of nosing and tasting a whiskey. And sometimes their technique is based on their experience with the whiskey. It could be related to their age, their chronological age, and sometimes it's related to the whiskey that they're presenting. And I'd like to go over why those different reasons make a difference and how it can kind of, affect the way that you would like to approach a whiskey down the road. I've put up two different whiskeys here. I've got the Aberlour 16 and the Aberlour Absinthe batch 46, which is 60% alcohol. So both beautiful sherry drams, both got a lot of character in them. One's a typical bottle strength of 40%, and the other one's, a cask strength of 50% more alcohol than that guy. If you approach these whiskeys the same, you're not going to get the same experience of them. And not just because they're different whiskeys, but because of what the alcohol carries to your nose and to your mouth. And this comes down to the way the nerves work. There's 5 nerves that go to the tongue that give you, the sense of taste that the tongue gives you as well as its movement. There's only one nerve that gives you your sense of smell, your basic sense of smell from your nose. What's really interesting is that studies will show that 80 to 90% of what you taste is actually what you're smelling. That's how important the olfactory nerve, the smell nerve, is to our perception of what we eat and drink. So when you talk about, whiskeys is alcohol plus a lot of flavors and some water in it. And alcohol is an anesthetic in some respects. So if you cut yourself and get alcohol in it, yeah, it burns, it really does, but then you get a bit of a numbing effect. And the same thing will happen on your tongue as well as in your nose. So when you take a whiskey, that's 40%, like the Aberlour 16, and you take a good smell of that, you can smell the characteristics of the whiskey. You get a really good draw. And you will get a burning sensation if you're not used to drinking whiskeys on a regular basis. And we talked about this previously about the wall, where the body really doesn't like alcoholic content over 35%. If you take a 60% alcohol and jam your nose down into it to nose it and get the characteristics of it, you'll be really careful that you don't burn your nose out. It's because if you dull the senses, with the overpowering alcohol, then you're not going to get, the real subtle characteristics and the aromas out of that whiskey. So if you see someone like Richard Patterson, and if you ever see him do his, nose of whiskey, he's putting his nose right in there, and he's doing so, hello, how are you? And that's fine and dandy. Richard's been doing it for 50 years. And there's two things that happen when you've been at it that long. The first thing is that, you don't really notice the alcohol anymore. But also, as we age, no offense to Mr. Patterson, as you age, the senses do get dull. So, the burn you get is less, and the characteristic you get out of whiskey actually goes down. You see someone like Cameron Miller, who's, the rep for brand ambassador, I guess, from Macallan in Canada. When he approaches a whiskey, he always approaches and tells people to approach the whiskey, an inch to 2 away from the glass. And when you smell, make sure you keep your mouth open at the same time. And, nosing the whiskey, smelling with your mouth open, dilutes the alcohol burn as you take a whiff, but also gets some of the flavors over the tongue and, get some registration of those flavors on the taste buds as well. So I guess in practical terms, if you are used to drinking alcohol on a regular basis and you don't get the burn of drinking a whiskey that's 40% or even cask strengths of 50%, then you can be a little more aggressive into a whiskey for the nosing and for swishing it. But if you're not, you still got to take your time with it. And I really like the way Cameron says, I've been in a couple tastings with him, and regardless of whether there's some real veteran whiskey drinkers there or some neophytes, he still says, take it an inch or two away, smell with the mouth open, really, really enjoy it. And that way you don't get that burn of the alcohol, you don't get the muting of the senses. But for, someone like myself who's been at it for a while, I'll still get my nose down in there like Patterson does. But it's never a really big whiff, it's just a little small, real small. Concentrate those volatiles in your nose and get a better character out of it. But if I approach a cask strength whiskey at, say 60%, even though when I drink a 60% whiskey, I don't get a lot of burn on the tongue, as other people would, I still approach it a little more gently on the nose, because I know that even though I have experience with this percent alcohol, I will still mute or anesthetize some of those nerve endings, and I won't get as much out of it as I'd like to. And that comes down to the other thing about adding water to whiskey. Adding water to whiskey really does change its character, and it changes for a number of different reasons. You start to release some of the chemicals in there, the congeners, the flavor compounds that don't like to be mixed with water, and the alcohol holds them in suspension. So you get some of those out of there, but you also still dull down the effect of the alcohol, muting some of the the taste buds on your tongue and some of the smell receptors in your nose. So take your time with the whiskeys, and now I say this again: if you want to slack down a whiskey, you're not really enjoying it, you might as well just do vodka shots or Jello shooters. Whiskey is made to be enjoyed for all the flavor it has. And if science tells us that we're getting a lot of that from our nose, then take your time with it. Spend 5 or 10 minutes smelling it and sniff it and swirl it around and really get your nose's worth out of it before you drink it. And I guarantee you'll enjoy it a hell of a lot more. It's the Whiskey Doc.